All right, welcome back to another episode of Phoenix Edge. This is an RPG podcast, and today, as promised, we're going to be discussing Final Fantasy XIII. This is one of those games that has a lot of conflicting feelings. It's kind of like 15, and that the fan base is very split apart about it. Some people really love it, some people really hate it. I think the general consensus about the game, I think, would be that it could have done a few things better. But overall, it's not a terrible game. And that's, if I had to summarize my feelings regarding the game in one sentence, it would be that it's not the greatest game on the planet, but it's not quite as bad as I believe it got a rap for when it first came out. Although I think that it does have some serious issues with it. What's your general thoughts on the game before we just dive in, Eric?
It's definitely one of my least favorite Final Fantasies. I'll go off the bat saying that. I won't say that I hate it. I would say I do like it in the grand scheme of things, because there's definitely a lot of redeeming qualities to it. The problem is it's very complicated to like. Because I like the grand scheme of like the lore and the story of it is great. I mean, but what's going to really come down to today is like the execution of everything is just so off-putting.
Sure. I mean, I think you kind of nailed it. It's not that or at least with me, it's not that I hate it. It's just, to me, it's a game of great extremes. The things that I like, I really, really like, and the things that I don't like, I really, really dislike. There's very little about Final Fantasy XIII that I just have it's whatever kind of attitude about it. It's either I just find it the most obnoxious thing I've ever seen, or it's, wow, that was fantastically done. So it's either one or the other with me. 1 second, my computer's telling me, hey, you need to scan. Not right now. I think this was a Fauci or something. All right. As corny as that was, we're going to move on. So my computer is not going to scan anymore. All right. Let me check that, make sure. Cool. We're good. So if you're listening to us on iTunes or some other podcatcher, the audio only version, you can find us on YouTube. Just search Phoenix Edge RPG Podcast. We should come right up. And vice versa. If you want to listen to this audio version, maybe you're looking at this on Tuesday and you're thinking, hey, the next day is Thanksgiving, or this week is Thanksgiving weekend and I got to do some traveling. I want to watch this, but I don't have the time. Download us on iTunes and you can listen to the audio only version. But other than that, let's go ahead and dive in. So we're going to do these a little bit differently than we did the 15 and Chrono Trigger discussion. Me and Eric were talking, and this plot is, we both understand it. We've played this game a few times now, but for us to sit here and go into an in-depth discussion on every minor detail with the plot, I think that would take a couple of episodes in of itself, and we're likely to get a few things wrong because
I'm tempted to go grab the game right now from my shelf and read the back of it, and I still don't think I'd be able to accomplish it.
Yeah, and it just is what it's a complicated game. It's got a lot of complexity to it. A lot of people really like that, and a few people probably a lot of people like myself find it overwhelming. But before we jump into, because I think we're going to have a lot of negativity about the game, I think before we do that, I think it would probably be best if we say what we like about the game before we just jump into negative Nancy land with this game. So I'll go ahead and start because I was kind of thinking about it before we started this, and if I had to pinpoint exactly what I like about this game, in general, I like how polished the game looks. It's a very, very polished game. Recently, when I booted up the game again on my PlayStation 3, I thought it was going to look a little aged, and I was actually really surprised how good this game still looks. It's a really, really good-looking game. And when you think Final Fantasy, you think, hey, this needs to be a polished game. It's got great-looking cutscenes. In that regard, it feels like a Final Fantasy, how polished it is. So I really, really liked how polished it was. In general, I found most of the characters, they had their own separate personalities, which I really, really liked. I like that they put a little detail on things such as characters from Pulse. had a little bit of an accent, whereas people from Cocoon didn't. I like that. I thought that was a really good touch. As far as the equipment system, I do have some criticisms with that, but in general, I really like the idea behind it, where you're leveling up items and through raw materials that you get from battling. I really like that aspect of it. And honestly, one thing that was kind of refreshing about this game for me was, as complex as the story gets, it leaves no stone unturned. At least for me, it doesn't leave any loose ends. It starts and finishes every single story plot point. It's whether it was a good plot point or a bad one, it finishes it till completion in a way where I don't feel like I'm left wondering. Like there was a conclusion to everything, and that's very rare, especially for Final Fantasy today. You know, where we'll be introduced to plot points and they don't really resolve, or they don't resolve in a way we'd like, or we're told by Square it'll resolve later. At least with this game, it really felt like everything was used, even over Final Fantasy XII. I mean, as much as I love 12, the fact that with a little revelation we get with Balthier, I don't want to spoil that game, but that plot point was never really utilized much else for the rest of that game, and it was really cool. I thought they were going to do something with that. With Final Fantasy XIII, they didn't really do that too much. Pretty much everything was utilized, everything was planned out, and everything, had a what's the word I'm looking for? It resolved by the end of the game. So in that regards, I do think that they did well with this. And the only other thing I can say is I have some criticism with how it was used, but in general, the soundtrack to this game I really enjoy. But I'll kick it over to you, Eric. I'm sure I probably said a lot of things that you were going to say, but for positive things with Final Fantasy XIII, is there anything that I didn't mention or you feel the need to say?
Well, I'll just start off on a general thing. Yes, graphically, it looks beautiful. It even still looks great today. You can notice some slight things are out of date or look a little a tad bit outdated, but overall, like
Sure.
the game, the color scheme, everything, it's gorgeous looking. The character designs are pretty good. The voice actors for them were pretty good. Beautiful soundtrack. I mean, that's something you can listen to every day, especially if you want to sit down and relax. And I mean, that is a top-notch soundtrack it has.
Yeah.
The combat system is pretty solid for the most part. It's easy to understand. There isn't too much complication to it.
It's fast, man. It's really
I think,
fast. I like it. I like how fast it is. I forgot to say that. Go ahead.
Yeah. And there are some aspects of it that I don't feel like were explained well, but if you do know it, that it's you can take advantage of the system big time. What else was good about it? I already said things were aesthetically pleasing, which Final Fantasy is always known for. That's always a plus. What else was there?
I think in that, and real quick, I think in that regard, that's the biggest highlight for me is I think Square really knocked it out of the park with this game as far as visually stunning as the game is. I mean, there's very few PS3 games that I think look as good as this one does, and that's kind of what Final Fantasy was known for. So I think that's really noteworthy for the game that it was able to maintain that for this long. But go ahead.
Yeah, and then I like the story of it. I like what they're going for with it. We can talk about execution of it in a minute,
Right?
but they did a very solid job of that. I did really like the very ending of it, of how that was executed. Not necessarily the final boss portion of it, but like how they executed that final scene was felt like a nice closure. And felt really good. Like despite like the problems, it's like it was still like a heartwarming, feel good ending.
Yeah.
I share my thoughts a lot with you also on the more positive aspects on it. I don't think there is as much I can contribute on that. I think we both agree that it is definitely a polished game, despite feeling like a rushed game and also at the same time, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean it's hard to. Initially, when we both went through this game together with someone else, and initially when this game started up, I had a very, very positive feeling about this game. I really didn't mind it too bad. I was disappointed with the game when it came out originally, but I didn't think it was as bad as everyone was saying. And I thought that with time, when we went back to it, that I would think even more positively of the game. And initially, for the first couple of hours, besides a couple of scenes where it made me want to basically hang myself, with like Nora and Snow and everything like that, I was very, very optimistic about this game. I thought for sure that it was going to be better than I remembered. And I think by about the halfway point, my mind had just had too much with this game, and I realized that I actually did not like it as much as I did before. And I wasn't in love with it before, but I didn't hate it. And I'm not to the hate point, but it was just surprising to me that when we revisited it, that it would that I didn't like it as much as I did before, which is
it's a frustrating game. I mean, it was like almost 8 years ago when I last played it, and we played it again, and like my perspective of it is so very different from last time. I'm definitely more on the side of not liking it, but it's not enough to say that like, oh, I hate the product or something like that. It's I don't know if I'm just getting old, I'm getting cynical with my age or or whatnot, but a lot of devices that I feel that makes a great RPG just feels less and less present in 13 the more I dig deep into it.
Yeah, I would say that most of the ideas, whether it be from a mechanical standpoint with the battle system or the equipment system, or whether it be a general idea standpoint for the plot or the way scenes were executed or the interactions that the characters have, most of the ideas themselves were really well constructed. I think where this game struggles is just in the execution. And I don't know why Square fumbled so much with the execution of literally, it felt like almost every single system and every single aspect of this game. I just found like I had an issue with, and I was really trying to be positive, but like even down to the way the music was being used, has a beautiful, beautiful soundtrack. I love the soundtrack, but I remember there's a very early scene in the game where Saz, I'm gonna call him Saz. I know some people call him Saz. I'm calling him Saz. Saz, himself and Vanille were in this pulse work camp type thing, and they're going around to these generators trying to turn them on to open up this door. And there's all these monsters all over the place. And I'm thinking it to myself, at this point in the game, we're on the run. We're being attacked by monsters. This guy doesn't know where his kid is, or he kind of has an idea, but he doesn't know if he'll ever see his kid again. And in the background, there's this like pleasant jazz music that's playing. Like, where is this coming from? Like, why is this not setting the tone for this game? It's just every scene and nothing felt quite right with it. It all felt very disconnected from the main plot, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it has poor directing and design philosophy in 13, and it's I kind of understand to an extent, because this was also another project that was in a poor development cycle, especially with it originally being on the PS2, then going to the PS3.
Yeah.
Don't know 100% know the full story on that, and dealing with the Crystal Tools engine, an engine they just built, and and then they're coming to find out, like, with what they're making, they have set limitations, especially like dealing with the PS3's memory, RAM, and such like that. So I'm sure it led to decisions like that to make it the way it is, but I still would argue that they could have done a better job with how to structure the game's linearity.
Sure. It's a good point, because I tried watching like the movie versions you can find on YouTube of this game where it does all the cut scenes and pivotal scenes and sets it up in a way to where, it's kind of like watching a movie, right? And I found watching the game that way was a tad bit more enjoyable to me because it was far more interesting to follow and I could keep track of everything that was going on. And I think what you were saying about the linearity, I think that's one of the, I really feel like that detracted from this game because there's such little to entertain you from point A to point B besides going forward and then getting in a battle. And there's nothing else for you to do. People compare this game to Final Fantasy X and say, or even other Final Fantasies and say, well, those games were linear as well. They just hit it better. And that might be true. And if that's the case, I feel like they should have hid the linearity better. I mean, there were maps in this game where I felt like they just copy and pasted the same map over again to make it longer. And this is baffling to me how uninteresting it is when you do that, and it just detracts from the story so much. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's the perfect word to call it is monotonous.
Yeah.
And what the other Final Fantasies do that 13 doesn't, and we'll use 10 specifically as an example because that's the most similar one to 13, is 10 had methods of breaking the monotony through going on the pilgrimage. We got proper world building. We had secrets that we could find. We had people we could talk to.
Boom, right there. That's big. People you can talk to. This game had nobody you could talk to getting from point A to point B.
And we also were able to go into towns, everything like that. And I felt like everything was building up and we knew everything about Spira by the end of it. And none of it was done through data logs like 13. Oh yeah, did we not address the elephant in the room? Data logs for 13. That's its idea of breaking monotony is just occasional cutscenes and reading data logs about stuff.
Look, with the data logs, the first time I played this game when it came out, I actually waited about a year because the reaction to the game was so bad. I just was like, okay, let me just give this some time because I didn't have a PlayStation 3 yet. So I waited about a year to play it. And when I eventually picked it up, I started playing it. I read the first 2 data logs and I told myself, okay, this data log is here for people that are new to RPGs or something. I don't need to read this. So I didn't actually read the data log until I got the pulse, right? So until I didn't look at it at all until I got the pulse, and I was starting to get a little confused with a few plot points because that's where the plot starts to thicken a little bit. And by the time you get the pulse, dude, if you have not read any of the data logs, good freaking luck. Because I opened that thing up and there was 650 data logs entries. I was just like, Jesus Christ, man. I'm going to be sitting here for 4 hours trying to work this out. So, man, dude, there are so many data logs. I can't believe, and there's so many cutscenes with this game as well. I think it's far more than any other Final Fantasy. So it's just baffling to me that they were not able to get the plot in through those cutscenes,
Well, when you give no opportunity for the characters to breathe or relax, you can't take in those world building concepts.
Yeah, well, and I think, to me, I feel like this game should have started off far, far earlier in the plot. I can see what they're trying to do. I like the intro sequence where they're on the train. It's really cool. It's kind of reminiscent of Final Fantasy VII, where you end up fighting that little scorpion thing, and after you get off the train, it's kind of cool. It's a nice gesture. But dude, the way that game opens is just not. After that, it was just not good. They should have started the game back in Bodum. I'm gonna say Bodum. I don't know how you say it. So guys out on YouTube, if you want to correct me, feel free. When they're in Bodum, and all these things started happening, like the Pulse vestige, they found that Sarah got branded, all this stuff going on. They should have just showed us that to begin with, and we could have had a little calmer experience. Lightning was a soldier in the city. We could have learned the battle system with her going out and fighting a wild beast that got into the city or something. And they could have I feel like this game would have made a lot more sense. But instead, it dumps us like right in the middle of the plot. They don't really tell us what's going on. And then they keep giving us these cutscenes of like day 3, day 7, but they're out of order, right? So they'll give you like day 9 first, and then they give you day 5, then they give you like day 12, and you're trying to like piece this all together. Meanwhile, it keeps uploading data logs like every 2 seconds. And it's just like, dude, it's so overwhelming. I don't know. Maybe I suck at it, but I don't know. You know?
It's how I would have done it is I would have started with establishing like relationships like between lightning and snow, because we're kind of just thrown into the middle of like they have a little, well, at least lightning has attention because of Snow and Sarah's relationship. I think I would have started something off in the action moment of like so they say that lightning, it was a Guardian Corps that helped protect fight monsters and such. Mm-hmm. And Nora, Snow's group, was part of a group that helped protect Bodum from like monsters and such. So I'm thinking to myself that like put like a scene where it's like an action-packed beginning scene with like lightning going in, fighting and take care of the monster. That's her mission. And while she's doing it, like right before she's like going to destroy the monster, like Snow comes in and interferes with something and screws up her mission. But despite that, they still get it done. And she like gets angry with him about it.
One of the other soldiers could have been like, "Hey, Light, isn't that your sister's boyfriend?" You know, and she was clearly like that would have just solidified her, you know, her just hatred, or not hatred, but her. Just she does not like this guy. But go ahead.
Right, but then then after they do that, like she goes back to like Bodum, she goes to go visit her sister. Then she finds out that's her sister is dating the same guy that like she already doesn't like. So this would already establish like a tension between Lightning and Snow for further events that we get to, which is the actual beginning of 13. And them interfering and ruining plans for Lightning and everything again. And then at the same time, we could have had more screen time with Saz and his son, and then more screen time with Hope and his mother, and then Vanille being mysterious and walking around being, you know, little ditzy the way she acts. And, you know, this could have been a setup for everything. And then we can see how the world is when the Fal'Cie run and everything, before like all the craziness happens when they're branded and they're on the run and stuff like that. So we know what they have lost, and we know what is at stake with that. And I don't feel like that was just conveyed correctly. You get it a little bit in 13's story, but I don't feel like you get like the full scoop of it.
Yeah. I mean, this world is such a foreign place to me. There's nothing like it in my known life, right? I don't know what it's like to live in the center of a basically floating planet above another planet. I don't know, with like godlike beings controlling it. That's really strange to me. You need to tell me what that's like. And setting that up in the beginning of the game would have been crucial for the rest of the entire game. I mean, so I find it just baffling that they decided to start the game off where they did, because even on the most recent playthrough, I found myself slightly confused at first because, okay, they're on this train for some reason, and then she explains what happened. Okay, I kind of get it. But then there's like planes flying over, and I hear gunfire, and I'm sitting there thinking like, okay, are we currently in Bodum, or where are we right now? Like, I just did not get it. And I think you're right. They really needed to set that all up. And like you said, what did they lose? Why are they, you know, their whole life was shaken up. You got to show people what their life was like beforehand, right? You can't start the game off like, if you start off Final Fantasy VII with the plate falling, that would have been action packed, but you didn't get to see what people's life was like before that, right? Yeah, I mean, you have to. There's a reason why you have to set that up. It's good storytelling.
Now you can set it up the way they did in 13. The problem, because 7 is set up in a similar matter. Like Avalanche is already in the heat of going in and like destroying Shinra's Mako reactors, but we ultimately get everything that's going on through the dialogue and the world building through that. So in a sense, you could do what 13 did and like have like the world building in game help establish what everything they had and lost. The problem is they just didn't do that. The thing I kind of established was just like an idea they can go with, but anything is possible to be done. It's just you just need a really good director behind it.
Yeah, I think the difference with 7 is it started off an explosive beginning, literally, but the game didn't cut to them on the run all of a sudden, right? There, you got to spend some time in the city. I mean, technically you were in hiding, but you didn't have to poke your head down too far. So I think that's the key difference. And I think you're right. They could have, honestly, if they could have done what they did. They could have left everything the same. I think if they would have just given you those flashbacks in order, that would have helped a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Because why they decided to make it out of order, I have no idea. That was ridiculous.
It does feel a little disjointed sometimes.
Yeah. So, it is what it is. I mean, I got so many issues with that first couple hours of that game. I mean, we might as well talk about the elephant in the room with Hope. A lot of people are. I would say almost everyone finds execution of the whole Hope blames Snow for murdering his mom or letting his mom die. Everyone's really unhappy with how that was done, including myself. And I don't know. I got a little bit of a different perspective on it now that I've kind of played it a few times, but I'm kind of interested to hear your thoughts first.
I don't really hate Hope as a character. I mean, he's like the typical 14-year-old teenager. Mm-hmm. I don't really have a problem with that. I mean, that's what I kind of hear from a lot of people. Like, oh, he's just a 14-year-old whiny boy. It's like, no, not really. But I think
I don't
what my problem with Hope in particular is his behaviors and his logic and reasoning seems really irrational even for a teenager. Like we know that like he didn't get a full glimpse of what happened between Snow and his mother, which could possibly lead him to conclusion like that. But in the cutscene, he could see what was going on, and it's very clear that Snow was trying to, help his mother get up. And again, and it's already established at the very beginning that Snow did not want people to come up and help them, but they insisted and volunteered, including his mother. Mm-hmm. And he even comes up to her and says, "Are you sure about this?" And she's like, "Yes, I'm very sure about it," and hands her the gun. So it leads me to the conclusion that Hope doesn't really have any strong base here to completely blame Snow for everything. He can blame the situation Snow created, but he can't really, but he's acting irrational to the point that he finds it justified in killing him when Snow was the very same person that was trying to save them all from inevitable death to begin with.
Sure. I think
so. It just doesn't make sense, his train of thought.
Yeah. To me, I'm in the middle on it because at first I was right along that path. I was like, hey, I watched the game, the cutscenes. It's very, very clear that she had absolutely nothing to do with her, Snow had absolutely nothing to do with her dying. And in fact, he did everything he could to prevent her from dying. And I still think that's the case. If I had to make a defense for Hope's reaction, I would have to say that like you said, he didn't see what happened. So for all he knows, his mom went off with this dude.
He kind of saw what happened.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how it got from his mom walking off to them hanging over the edge, I don't know how much of that he saw, right? So if he just...
There's a cutscene where he's looking at it and he sees her fall. And
No. But before that, does he see her fire the rocket launcher? Does he see that whole chain of events? Does he know how, like, because from my perspective, it seems to me that every scene we get with Snow is kind of irritating for the first couple hours of the game. And I almost wondered if developers did that intentionally because they wanted the player to see the way Hope saw Snow, right? Because Hope routinely refers to Snow as careless, as reckless. He gets people killed. He doesn't think about his actions. He doesn't take into account that the other people around him that are getting hurt. In the first couple hours of the game, that's what you see about Snow. He's like doing bike races and stuff after people are getting killed. Like he's making jokes. It kind of makes me wonder if that was intentional. Now, I realize I'm giving Square Enix a lot of leeway here with this. And whether or not that was their intention, I do think it was poorly executed. But if that's the case, I can understand why Hope would want somebody to blame within like the first day or so after realizing his mother died. That makes sense to me. But it does seem odd that he wouldn't come around earlier in the game, especially when you're traveling with this person for so long, that this person's not responsible. The Sanctum is, right? But I can
it's
see
ultimately the fallacy, the Sanctum, who are the blame for it. That's why Hope pretty much continues on the journey to stop, other people getting purged the way that him and his mother were about to.
Yeah, so I can see. To me, that's my biggest issue is why he didn't redirect his anger almost immediately, because they're in that entire mess because of the government, right? Snow was even if Snow was an idiot and he doesn't account for his actions, what other choice did they have? Were they just going to sit on that road? They only had two options. They could sit on the road, get captured and get killed, or try to fight and probably get killed, but still have a chance maybe to live, right? So it didn't seem like there was any other alternative. So I think the better way to have handled this whole Hope and Snow thing was, and they did it a little bit, but I wish they had done it some more, was to really emphasize that the reason Hope wanted to get back at Snow wasn't necessarily because he thought Snow murdered his mother or was careless and didn't try to protect his mother or whatever the case. It was more or less that his reaction or his attitude afterwards, like, yeah, I'm a hero, but sometimes things happen. If you get, I think Snow one time said, if those who fight, if you get killed, are stupid or something like that, right? And it really stung Hope. Like, I could see why that would make him pissed. I really wish they had a lot more lines like that where Snow was really saying something that he thought was kind of smart or kind of, funny, but he didn't realize like, oh shoot, like this is that kid's, that woman's son, where he's not realizing that the damage he's doing. And we saw that anger build over time. That would have been a little bit better for me. And I kind of wonder if that's the direction they originally intended to go. But regardless, that was that whole dynamic was just awful, in my opinion. Especially how long they dragged it on. It took so long to resolve.
Yeah, then even after that, like, Hope was kind of there for the rest of the journey. Now, granted, it's not the Final Fantasy could be famous for that at times. The character has his arc, and he's just kind of there for the rest of it.
Yeah.
But that was it for a game that's like heavier on the character progression. Is like he kind of got like a little bit thrown to the side after polls. He had some scenes here and there, but it was mostly focused. Actually, it was more focused like on Fang and Vanille, mostly.
Yeah.
After that, with them being related to the Ragnarok.
Mm-hmm. We could jump into that, but one thing I think we should probably address is the main character, Lightning. What are your thoughts with Lightning? Do you think did you like her character arc? Do you think it was well done?
I think it could have been better. I like the character herself. I know everyone goes, "Oh, she's just a female Cloud." I was like, no, but she does generate enough interest and buzz. I mean, Japan definitely likes her. Yeah. I like her character, but again, execution not so great.
Yeah, I mean, she very clearly was supposed to be a female Cloud. I mean, a lot of the imagery you see her wearing that little turtleneck zip up thing. I'm pretty sure that's something that Cloud wears a lot too. Like it was. It's very much cloud-like, but I don't get the I didn't get the impression that she was basically, if you replaced her character with Cloud, that the dialogue would fit perfectly. Like I felt like she had her own character that was exclusive to this game. So I don't. I think really, as far as the Cloud and Lightning thing goes, it's just the imagery for me, you know. So, but as far as her character arc, I didn't really have a problem with it. Basically, to me, it just seemed like her whole deal was that she didn't believe her sister when her sister confronted her and told her, "Hey, I'm a Lassie and I want to marry Snow," and she thought she was making it up for some reason. And she, that's the classic when Lightning says the worst birthday ever. One of the greatest scenes in this game. But apparently, it seems to me like the whole game, she's kind of hating on herself for making that decision of like not believing her sister. And I think a lot of that centered around her just, that's why she was mad at Snow, because she was, I guess Snow said he was going to protect her and he didn't. And she felt like she should have. And she was blaming him for stuff she should have been responsible for. But for me, for a main Final Fantasy lead character, to me, that's pretty weak character development. I know that is character development because I guess by the end of the game, she's able to forgive herself. But to me, she still is. I know a lot of people disagree, but to me, she's largely the same person by the end of the game. I mean, I don't know. The beginning of the game, she was a soldier. Soldier's job is to protect the people. By the end of the game, that's what she's doing. She's protecting the people. The fact that she forgave herself and made a few friends along the way is cool. But I don't know. And usually in Final Fantasy games, the main character tends to go through a lot more than, I made some friends along the way,
Yeah, Lightning, she is heavily promoted on the box and everything like that. But she isn't used to the full extent that a main character usually is. And it's fine if you want to go in that direction with like Final Fantasy VI. Like, Terra is technically the main character, but everyone has a strong story arc of their own they go through that's more with on the same level as Terra. Now, they could have done something like that. The problem is that they weren't really promoting that. They were promoting that like Lightning is the face of this game. It's going to be about her, like even down to like the very first trailer of this game that they've ever shown. It was focused on Lightning and not like a group of friends or anything like that. Even like 15, to its credit, established right at the beginning, it's like this could be about Noctis and his friends, and that is essentially what it is, Noctis and his friends. And 13 kind of failed to advertise that correctly. There are good character progression moments. Like Lightning's a little more easygoing when you get on the pulse. Like she's more she has like a kind of resolution with Snow. They're not like on the greatest of terms, but she's willing to accept him and events similar to that. And I think she turned out pretty okay by the end of it. I think it's more of my complaints can lie in the sequels, but I'm not going to talk about the sequels.
Yeah, maybe at some point. I guess to me, all that's fair and all that's good, but I mean, if you were to compare this to, let's say, Final Fantasy XII, and I'll give a very slight spoiler here, but one of the main characters, Ash, at the beginning of the game, if you were to give her the Nethicite or whatever it is, from the Dynast King, if you were to give her that at the beginning of the game, she would have committed genocide. She would have killed thousands of people. She would have killed the entire empire just to get revenge, right? But by the end of the game, she's given that opportunity, and she decides from her character development, she turns it down because she realizes it's wrong, right? To me, like there has to be, for quality character development, or at least interesting character development, you have to set up a problem that the character is dealing with in a big way. Maybe something where they're really wrong. Or just even like Final Fantasy X at the beginning of the game, he's very self-centered. He's a star athlete. That's all he cares about is getting home because he wants to get back in the spotlight. He's always trying to show off. He's kicking the blitz ball around and everything like that with Waka. but by the end of the game, he's very selfless. He's willing to sacrifice a lot for that conclusion of the game. And, these are like big things that people deal with. And I guess everything with Lightning in general, the fact that she kind of warmed up to Snow by the end of the game. I mean, I get it. Snow was a very agitating person for me. So to be able to go from not really liking that character to by the end of the character kind of liking them, that was a journey in of itself. That was quite the accomplishment. Probably one of the biggest accomplishments of the entire series. I'm joking there, by the way. But I mean, to me, I would have liked, like you said, I think from the beginning, I'm kind of long-winded with this, but I would have liked something a little more substantive than just her getting along with people. I mean, I'm glad she was anti-social at the beginning of the game, and by the end of the game, she's more social. I guess there's something to be said about that, but I don't really feel like she was tried and tested. I don't know. That's just me. I could be wrong, but that's just the way I feel about it.
Mm-hmm. So. I think the theming and the character development of this game overall is pretty okay. It's just, the more of my problem lies in that we didn't get proper world building and everything was just put in data logs. If you wanted to find out more about something, you just open it up and go in there and read about it. I don't want to go into a pamphlet and read about it. I want to actually go and experience it and learn it for myself. And the game just simply doesn't give you the opportunity for that.
Sure. As far as, yeah, I mean, I entirely agree. I mean, that was an issue. As far as the rest of the plot goes, I'm trying to think if there's anything I want to say about any of the other characters. I think the biggest complaint about the characters in general, I would say for the plot or just the character development or anything around that would be the way the Eidolons scenes were. It seemed to me like each character had a very pivotal moment in the story where they kind of had a realization about themselves, and in order to come to terms with that, they had to fight an Eidolon. And by the end, by defeating the Eidolon, it was supposed to be symbolic that they overcame that issue and they are now a changed person. And while on paper that sounds cool, but most of the time those scenes just seemed very forced. Like, it's only like, for example, when Lightning first encounters Odin, you see Hope trip and fall on the ground, and she just randomly starts screaming at him from nowhere. When it just seems like really odd. Like if it almost feels like they set that scene up for an excuse for the Eidolon to come out. It didn't seem like that scene would have been there if they didn't have the Eidolon there. But
there is technically a reason those Eidolons came to them. It's not explained in the game, though.
Well, yeah. So from my perspective, there's two ways you can look at it. Either Lightning, and I'm just saying Lightning here, but each character's situation is the same, where they kind of freak out. But either Lightning or any other character is freaking out because the Eidolon is influencing them, right? Because they're coming to them. So if that's the case, then it's not really character development, because it's like that's not them. Some other thing is possessing them. Or it's because they're so emotional in that moment that it's summoned the Eidolon. And if that's the case, then why do these scenes feel so forced? You know?
Mm-hmm. Now, the lore reason is that
I got it completely
Petra
wrong.
granted them the Eidolons, and apparently, like, a strong surge of emotions happens that summons them forward. Now, granted, they are forced scenes mostly, and it's really weird to see the characters just out of nowhere become like completely irrational.
Sure.
And like out of place of like where they just were. It's like, oh, they're just happy-go-lucky a minute ago. Then the next minute they're like, it's just having a complete meltdown. And then the Eidolon comes out, they fight it, and they're like, oh, wait, no, I'm cool again.
Yeah, I'm just, why? You defeated the Eidolon, but like you still have to deal with like what happened. I don't know. But whatever. Well, after it happened twice, I was just, okay, this is going to happen to all the characters. I'm just going to get over it. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying they kind of do.
Yeah.
Kind
Yeah, it's kind of like, hey, Hope, I'm sorry for yelling at you. It's like, yeah, that was kind of messed up. I don't know. I guess she's a little more maternal afterwards in that particular scene, so I'm not giving that credit. But anyways, so I mean, that was my biggest thing with that is that they seemed like instead of having other big character reveals, they saved all those big reveals for the Eidolon moments for the most part. So I don't know. Well, I think my favorite character in this game would have to be Saz. I think he's a great Final Fantasy character. I enjoy most scenes with him. He's funny. He's interesting. He has the issue that he's dealing with his son isn't something I can necessarily identify with because I don't have children. Obviously, or I shouldn't say obviously. You guys don't know that, but it's something I can't really identify with. But it's in this crazy world. It's something that is the most anchored that I could understand. So it's probably the biggest aspect out of the whole story that I found enjoyment out of. You know,
You know who my favorite character is?
who's that?
Daisley.
Yeah, Bartantalus.
It's a tad bit of sarcasm there, but
yeah. Well, dude, I'm trying to get it started. It's a joke. It's a joke. It's entirely a joke. But it would be awesome if like an entire movement goes for a Bartantalus DLC. I'm telling you, I want to figure out what happened with that guy.
That is one of Final Fantasy XIII's biggest flaws. Is not necessarily the villain himself, but the lack of presence of scenes with the villains. What we need screen time with the protagonist like we do the antagonist. We need to know what the antagonists are doing, how they're feeling, create more than just a one dimension out of them. And we don't really get that. We get I believe his name is Yag, who we're conflicted with, but you know, he's just doing his job mostly.
Yeah, Yag Roche or something like that.
Who is a little more sadistic, but she is like but her presence is just like almost never there. And when we do get more of her, Daisley just kills her off like that. And it's like, oh, well, you could have been an interesting character. And when we finally get to Daisley, he just throws everything at us at once. And we just never really got time with the villains. And on top of that, you know, I'm still under the impression that Jill should have been the main villain. If people want a full description of why I think why, I'll be glad to give it to you.
Why do you think so? You have me intrigued.
First off, she's more interesting. She got introduced during the plot. She showed signs that she could be a potential main villain. I was thinking that when Daisley, you know, showed himself as a fal'Cie, I was wondering if she came up with like some sadistic type of plan that she could become a fal'Cie herself. Like she figures out how to channel into that like godlike energy and like kind of becomes herself, and she kills Daisley. And then she plans to go against the fal'Cie of Cocoon and destroy it so she could meet the maker who would come back and create it. And then she would find a way to grant or get herself the power of the maker and become a god.
Yeah, see, that sounds far more interesting than what they did. And I really felt like Daisley, he really seems like one of those Final Fantasy. He seems like one of those Final Fantasy villains that Square would kind of like throw in at the last minute in the olden days, where it's like, aha, in the last 10 minutes, you thought this was the real villain, but nope, you also have to defeat this guy. And he just comes out in his dumb little outfit and you just defeat him. You know, it didn't seem like he was a very good villain to like have over like half the game, you know. It just wasn't very menacing. Half the time he was helping me. It was just really, really strange.
He didn't come off as very intimidating either, at least by design. Like no one can really take that design really seriously. At least I can't. It's very off-putting. He kind of looks like he's wearing a bride's outfit and a Pope outfit at the same time.
Hey man, the Pope, man. Like, oh yeah, it's just weird. Like, and then he has a veil. Like, why do you have a veil? That's the most unintimidating thing on a man ever. A veil.
Yeah. Overall, with the villains, though, Jill is just such a waste of potential, and I kind of think Square Enix sees that because they let her be downloadable content, I believe, in 13.2 as one of the super bosses in the Coliseum.
Mm-hmm.
And she's pretty decently hard to beat.
I think that would have been, like you said, a much more interesting if they utilized her more, because, I mean, exactly like you said, she was introduced in the plot. She had a reason to be there. It would have made more sense and a little more interesting if she was at least what we thought was the villain for at least half the game until they brought in, everyone else. But she could have been like a Kuja character or something like that,
Yeah, think about it. They fight Daisley and they beat him, and then he's like telling Jill to destroy them or whatnot, because he's in a weakened state, and she takes the opportunity. She kills him, and whatever technology she has, she finds a way to generate that fallacy power and apply it to herself, and then she becomes a fallacy herself. And then her ultimate plan is to drop or kill Orphan to drop Cocoon, which is
that's
there would obviously have to be some rewriting to make it work. But
this is just off the cuff here. We don't have like charts here, so all you Final Fantasy 13 experts, if you're having a brain aneurysm right now because of some little small detail we forgot, sorry. But I mean, what if you chased her down for like half the game? You thought she was the villain, and she was the villain, but then she pulled like a Beatrix move, and she just at the last minute joined your team. That would have been incredibly like surprising and rewarding. You would
have to establish her conflicting feelings during it, because that's how they did it with Beatrix. Like in front of the face, like she kind of comes off as cold as ruthless to Zidane in the group.
Mm-hmm.
But like when they're sneaking around the Red Rose airship,
they
overhear
scenes.
her, and she's conflicted with the orders that she's given. So if they did something like that with Jill, where she's conflicted with the orders she's given by Daisley / Bartandalus.
Well, I mean, if she learns,
then it would make more sense.
If she learns, like, hey, this guy is just trying to make us go to war, right? I mean, that could have been enough for her to switch sides. But
I think Yogg was a little bit more in that role, despite us defeating him. Like I don't think he was 100% for the war. I think he was doing his job and doing what he believed was right, not from a villainous perspective, but from it's my duty perspective.
Sure. Yeah,
so we kind of got that with Yogg.
I kind of like that character. He seemed interesting to me. It's just that I didn't get as much screen time as I wanted with him. It seems like every time he came on the screen, I ended up fighting him. I didn't see any scenes with him outside of when he approached the party, which I think this game needed, right? They needed some additional cutscenes with one of the villains and like what they're doing. I mean, I know they had a couple of scenes with Daisley, I think, right? Or it was from like a TV or something. But if they would have had a few more with Yogg, where he was just, I don't know, him talking to soldiers and they're questioning, or like, sir, is this really what we're supposed to be doing? Or something like that. It would have made that character a little more interesting,
Yeah, we should have just had more personal interference from Jill and Yogg before we got to Daisley, if Daisley was to be the main villain.
Yeah.
Or like I said, more screen time with them, so we kind of know who Daisley is. I also think if you made Daisley more aesthetically intimidating, it would have been better. This is the future. They could have made it more like he looks modern, like he wears a suit, he's a big guy, he definitely looks like he can take command or something like that.
Yeah, now
the entire game, I was just kind of questioning, like, what type of character is he? And like, we don't really get anything till it, and then we just find out he's just an asshole.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of get I feel like they try to play it off like he's like kind of like a religious leader almost. Not that like 13's,
despite being the president.
Yeah, right. Not that like they're trying to actually say there's like he's a religious leader, but he kind of seems like he would fit that role. Like he seems like he would fit very well in Final Fantasy Tactics, right? Or something like that, where he feels like that would be a fitting role for him with the character design that he has. And it didn't really mesh well with me with this game, because there's no, for that villain to work, there has to be a lot of political intrigue. There has to be a lot of backstabbing and like, just
we need to see more manipulation from him
more dialogue manipulation. Not he can't if you're gonna have him be the villain because he's a big tough guy, you can't have him walk out with a veil and like a freaking cane, like he's a like a Pope pimp or something. Like I don't know, man. It just did not work at all for me. Every time the guy came on the screen, it was just total immersion breaking because I would just laugh. So I don't know. That's my take with him. One thing that does remind me of is I did not like how the fal'Cie were portrayed in this game. There's a couple of scenes where Lightning has this epiphany, which is strange that she didn't realize this before, that the fal'Cie treat them like pets, right? But I'm not quite sure if that's really a good description because they kind of make it seem like people are just livestock and the fal'Cie are really controlling them and they're there for their amusement and stuff. And I'm looking at like the fal'Cie for Eden, who just sits there and like makes food for them and stuff. I'm not sure if Eden really got the good end of the stick there. I mean, these humans get to go and, have lives and, they go to the beach and they have fun and everything like that. And meanwhile, this fal'Cie's just sitting there making food, right? Or Orphan is a power source. It keeps the world floating. That doesn't seem very godly to me. That just seems like almost like a slave, and I guess that's part of the narrative is, well, maybe is why they're upset, but, I don't know. When it gets to that whole part of the game, maybe that's where the game loses me, but I didn't buy that they were like making the people's lives in Cocoon bad. It seemed like they were like generally pretty positive besides Portantilus, but I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of wish we got a better establishment of that, just seeing how people react or like how people are every day on Cocoon.
Sure.
Like, is it like more like an empire where like people feel like oppressed, or is it a place where like normal everyday modern society, like you and myself, like.
Well, every scene we saw from the flashbacks, which is sad that that's the only way we saw it was flashbacks. We didn't get to experience it, but it seemed as if it was like that, right? You saw in Bodum with them just like at the bar, Fang's drinking a drink, or Snow started his Nora group and like the government doesn't seem to mind, right? It just seems weird. Sarah and Snow can just decide to get married. They don't have to ask for the government's permission. There's festivals with these great looking special effects and everything. It didn't seem they didn't seem oppressed at all. Maybe there's some stuff in the lore that shows how they were oppressed. But if you look at Final Fantasy VII with Shinra, like, okay, then I could see why. Okay, this guy is kind of bad. Like, I can see why people are not happy with this guy. But I mean, this game,
no, that's the opposite with 7. Like, everyone thinks Shinra are good people, or providing them like life and humility and stuff like that. And,
unless you live under the plate, right? Well, I guess even them, yeah.
And then, and Avalanche knows that the macro energy has taken the life force from the planet, so they're deciding to blow up the macro reactors, despite knowing that it would set people back in terms of their livelihood.
Yeah,
but it would ultimately save the planet. That's why they're looked upon as terrorists.
Well, okay, that's a good point then. I mean, I don't know. I guess to me, even when we saw Saz speaking to Vanilla about just what his thought, she asked him. She's basically saying, "Hey, what do you think about people from Pulse or something like that?" And he said something like, before I got messed up in this mess, I didn't believe the government's crap. I thought it was all propaganda." I mean, the fact that he felt comfortable enough to say that and it wasn't like he had to hide that tells me like, okay, was it a democracy or was it something like the United States or other first world nations? It probably wasn't as great, but it didn't seem all that bad. I mean, people were willing to criticize the government. The Sanctum was there and they were trying to constantly keep the people happy. They're like, oh, we need to catch a pulse to see so we can keep everyone from being afraid. I mean, it wasn't that I wouldn't want to live there, but I mean, it didn't seem like it was such a bad place, So I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe I'm being picky.
No, I mean there's a lot that we want more out of 13. I just don't feel like they just gave it to us because I really like how everything is set up, and everything is just there to make like a really good game. And I just don't. I mean, I just feel like they did like a serviceable job with it. I don't feel like they did a great job. It's not so horrible that I couldn't go back and play it again. But I just see a lot more of the monotony now than I did the first time, which can kind of lead us to the next subject matter, the battle system and how it integrates with the hallway simulator that people like to call it till we get the pulse.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's jump into it because I was actually thinking about that. We still got to cover the battle system. I mean, I can give my overall thoughts real quick on that. I mean, I liked how quick it was. Like I said, I think there was a lot of good things about it, but to me, I found it really fatiguing how difficult every single battle was. Every single one felt like it would take several minutes. I didn't like that I couldn't control the other characters. I didn't like that if my main character died, the whole battle was over, despite the fact that all my other characters were still alive. I felt like the AI on the other characters was not quite right sometimes. I don't know. Is that kind of what you were thinking with it?
I'm absolutely baffled why so much control is taken from you in the battle system. I'm completely okay with like the auto battle that everyone has a problem with because normal fights you just kind of want to just like get through them and go on. With how many fights that you do in this game down the hallways, you kind of appreciate the auto battle button at the end of the day.
I don't know,
and they certainly don't work on bosses. To me, at least definitely later bosses, you cannot use the auto battle.
Yeah, to me, it seems kind of like the battle system's kind of confused. Because on one end of the spectrum, they're doing auto battle, they remove the random encounters. They're doing all these quality of life updates, right? If you get a game over in a battle, it just lets you start off like right before the battle again, which I appreciate it because these battles are really difficult. But then at the same time, the freaking battles would take like several minutes, and I'm just like, just give me control of the characters. If you're going to make it this strategic, right? If it's supposed to be this strategic, give me freaking control of my freaking characters. But I mean, most of the time, the whole paradigm thing wasn't too bad. I could kind of get in the groove of what they wanted. If you get a game over, you kind of know where you messed up. You try it again, and usually it's a bit better. But to me, it's just these battles sometimes would just take far too long. It was just relentless. I don't know.
And especially right before we get the pulse and fight Sid, that had to have been the most excruciating things I've ever seen in the game. It's like just every time you think you're about to finish that quote unquote, dungeon, it's like they hit you with another one and it looks exactly the same as what you just went through. And you're like, please stop it. And like, I remember we were getting like just stressed out about it. And like, it was just battle after battle, and the battles themselves were just annoying also. And people can argue, oh, you can just dodge them. It's first off, they're not that easy to dodge. And secondly, it's like you do want the Crystarium points for it. And like, it's so baffling how it got designed like this. It's like, I'm no game developer, and I feel like I could have just like made like more elaborate, better designed dungeons than they did.
Yeah, that particular one you're talking about, it's right before you get the pulse, and I literally feel like they just copy and pasted the same freaking area over and over again. And those battles were just relentless. Oh my God. And I don't know. One thing that was kind of good about this game is that because the battles were so difficult, that once you were able to update and experiment with your equipment setup and you found a good setup, that it did feel rewarding to when you went to the next battle and you just decimated everything. You're just like, okay, I figured things out. But the game was ruthless. It would let you have that moment of pleasure for like 6 minutes before it's like, well, I hope you enjoyed it because now everything's ramped up times 10. You know, just go ahead.
I did like the battle system. I think it's a good battle system. My problem with it just lies down to a few things. One, party leader should not be dead, or like it should not be game over when the party leader dies.
Yeah.
Two, you need to let yourself switch between the three characters. You can still do a paradigm, but there are times where you want to focus on, one aspect more than the other. And I feel like the AI could not 100% take in what you're wanting it to do. I mean, granted, the AI in the game is really good. I mean, it knows when it needs to do something, but I feel like if I had manual control of it, that I could have even better advantage in the battles with it. Sometimes it's like I died just because a character didn't want to do something. And on top of that, the battles feel too, this is ironic to say, but the battles feel too long for such a fast-paced system.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at earlier, is it just feels confused because they do all these quality of life things to speed it up, but then the battle just takes forever. I think one thing in addition, like you said, switching between the characters, or if you die, if a prompt just came up that said, hey, Lightning died, who do you want to make the party leader now? And you just chose somebody else instead of making you start the battle over again. Considering how long these battles take, that would have been a great addition. And I think if they wanted to add some more strategy to it, they had such a robust equipment system with all this leveling up, and all the different weapons have all these different advantages and disadvantages. If they allowed you to switch weapons and battle, that I think would have been really, really cool or a good addition to the battle system, just really giving it some flavor. And I think I would have also preferred if they took a nod from Final Fantasy X and let you switch like snow in there, right? And if lightning wasn't working out and you're like, okay, I thought lightning was gonna be good for this battle, let me switch her out with snow. And then snow comes in and he says something dumb, but he does better. And you're like, okay, this is a good setup, right? I think that would have been a little bit better if they just made those two additions,
Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Granted, if you play the sequels, they did listen to the criticism of that.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, any of the re-releases they did in 13, they did not alleviate any of the issues. Like, especially the one where before they let you choose which character you want to play as, like they forced you onto one. That's another major no for me.
Yeah, well, this game, they forced you with a certain main character for like 20 hours. Really ridiculous.
Don't make me play Hope when Lightning's standing right next to me, please.
Yeah, well, and that's the whole thing with this game that you were talking about, is that the level design is so linear, it gives you such a lack of options. You can't go back, you can only go forward. The Crystarium, you can only go one direction. There's only one way you can go. The battles, it's so restrictive, right? You can't switch who the main party member or party leader is. The party leader dies, that's it. You can't control your other party members. It's very restrictive. It's a very restrictive game. And I can talk for hours how much I didn't like that. But I think the only other thing with the battle system that I could honestly say I think they could have done better is the paradigm system. As far as when you're setting up your paradigms, I thought it was ridiculous that if you set up all these paradigms and then you switched out a character, right? So if you had Lightning in your party and you're like, Lightning's not really working, let me switch Fang in here, right? So you switch Fang in there and now you have Fang, Hope, and Saz. Well, all of a sudden you have to go through and make all these paradigms again, right? So all these paradigm setups. Why didn't they just have that? So like, it's like, hey, you learned a new paradigm setup, and then you could just go in there and click on them by name instead of having a menu pop up where you have to like continually click like 3 different paradigms, over and over again, despite the fact that you've already done this a billion times,
Yeah. Or at least let you, or at least like gray out like what you can't do anymore, and then when you switch a character out, you only need to switch what combinations are not possible.
Yeah,
like with it. I don't need to clarify again and see what exactly it does when you switch it out. I believe that's how it works. And yeah, I think a history button would have been great also. So you remember certain combinations that you made in the past.
Sure.
Or something like, I guess it would take too much memory on the PS3, so I kind of get it. Mm-hmm. But or like have like certain like saved setups.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. I mean, just the fact that you had to continuously just go in there and do the same thing over and over again was just so monotonous that it just got old. One thing I did enjoy about the game that I spoke earlier about was the equipment system. I have issues with it. Before I said I overall I enjoyed the process of getting. You'd have to get organic parts to use as multipliers. I believe to use mechanical parts, you could get bonus upgrades for experience points that would make the level up of your individual weapons or equipment happen faster. I really liked that aspect of it. I thought that was really cool. But A, I felt like it was too hard to get materials. And B, I didn't like the fact that once you mastered a weapon, if you upgraded it into a new weapon, that the weapon would actually get worse. And because it takes so long for you to get material, when that happens and your sword actually gets dramatically worse, it's just like it's like, what? You know how long it took me to get it to that level? And now you have to go through several hours of the game with your sword sucking for it to, improve again. I did not like that at all. I mean, I realize some people might say that's an interesting game mechanic, but with how difficult these battles were to begin with, I don't think that was good for this game,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. It's the weapon upgrade system was a little wonky, especially since the consistent amount of weapons that you get throughout the game for them. So it feels like you kind of wasted your time, like upgrading something to the max. But I guess maybe the point is to not upgrade them fully, but to, put a little more into them because. I don't know. I think that's one of my things. I don't care too much about upgrade systems like that. But yeah, I agree with you for the most part. Yeah.
Cool. I'm trying to think anything else with the gameplay. The only other thing I can think of is the Crystarium, and there's not much to say about it other than, it was simply a railroad track that you followed. You don't really get to make decisions. I mean, I guess it kind of would branch out, and you could like skip some HP if you really wanted to, but I don't know why you would do that. So I don't know. I didn't like how it stopped you from progressing further until you got to a point in the game. I thought that was kind of crappy, but 1 second. Go ahead. I have a thing I got to check.
Yeah, it's the Crystarium's okay. I don't find it very it's just kind of there. I guess it's kind of more like the sphere grid system. It's not, I guess it's just not too much to think about. It's not my ideal way of how to level and progress a character, but it's serviceable. It works. It's easy to understand. Doesn't feel complicated. So I can't criticize it, but so much.
Cool. Well, I mean, at this point, we've covered character development. We covered the plot and the just general things we had with the villains. We've covered the battle system. We covered the equipment system. We covered the Crystarium. We talked a little bit about the music. We liked the music, but it was kind of awkward at some of the places they chose to use music. It didn't seem like it quite fit. We said it was a beautiful game. I'm trying to think, is there anything else that you want to bring up about this game before we conclude this episode?
I won't say it's the worst game. I would say it's a serviceable game, and it definitely has a lot of flaws to it, but it's definitely split amongst the community. So, if you are curious to try it out, if you see it for cheap, definitely, or not definitely, if you want to see for yourself, go ahead and pick it up. It's, you may like it more than I did, and I can understand why, certain aspects may not be, as appalling to you as it is to me. So I do encourage you to at least try it and see if you can try to form your own opinion and see maybe if you can offer perspective that maybe that we hadn't looked at of it, and maybe we'll appreciate it more on that level.
Sure.
But in my opinion, this is like just average.
Yeah.
Serviceable, average.
Yeah, I don't think it's a terrible game. I've played compared to a lot of other JRPGs, like this game is actually not that bad. You know, if you try to look at it in the grand scheme of every RPG that's ever been made, you know, and you're comparing it to PS4 titles and everything else, it doesn't stand too well. But I mean, compared to, you know, other JRPGs, like it's not the best out there, but it's not the worst, right? I believe Star Ocean, the newest one, that got a 5 out of 10, right? So I mean, there are some not so good, and I haven't played that game by the way, but there are some not so good RPGs. So we got to keep that in mind. But other than that, I think we've pretty much ran this episode as far as we can take it with this game without just going further in depth with things we didn't like with the plot. But all right, so we'll wrap that up with this episode. Next week we'll come out with another topic space episode. I saw a couple of comments that we can bring up on the next episode. We can probably bring up the whole EA thing. I'm sure you saw that with the DLC or the loot boxes and everything like that. I'm sure we could tie that in somehow, but we'll have to save that for a discussion next week. So thanks for listening, and make sure you check us out on iTunes, or if you're watching it to us on YouTube. If you're watching this far, please give it a subscription. We really appreciate that. It lets us know that people are enjoying the episode. But we'll catch you next week. Thanks, guys.
All right, take care, all.
You became a lessee, so now you're gonna marry this idiot? And you think I'm gonna buy that? Full points for originality. But don't forget, if you really are a lessee, it's my job to deal with you. Sis. This is ridiculous. Worst birthday ever.